is Steve Carty. I'm an instructor for Ultimate Medical Academy, and I teach MG 2150. So today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 6 in all of your readings. So if you, hopefully you've had a chance to review that chapter. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in healthcare for, probably 20 plus years. I started out in nursing, have a nursing degree and worked a couple of years in nursing and decided to go from there into healthcare administration. So I went to the University of Oregon, received my master's degree there, and then got into, actually I was a director or administrator for 10 assisted living facilities, moved around a little bit, and then from there I launched into hospital administration. So worked my way up into a COO position and then eventually a CEO position, and worked at a couple of different hospitals there. So that's just me in a nutshell. And I am now have been in education, higher education, for the last, about 7 years, and thoroughly enjoy talking to students and giving them a little bit of background and knowledge that I've learned over the years. So I will go ahead now and get into the course. So, or into the chapter 6. So if you can hold tight, I will switch gears and get into my PowerPoint. Okay, so chapter 6, organization structure and design. So learning objectives for this chapter are basically to identify the elements of organizations, describe bureaucratic perspective on organization and design, identify and explain key situational influences on organization design, describe basic forms of organization design that may characterize organizations, and then identify and describe emerging issues in organization design. Organization structure, basic key elements of organization, of organizing. I keep saying organization, but organizing. Organization structure and design, the overall set elements that can be used to configure an organization is the definition of that. So then we get into job specialization. Job specialization is the degree to which overall task of organization is broken down and divided into smaller component parts. And this is something that has drastically developed over the years, and especially it seems like a few years ago when I was a hospital administrator, this has become more and more of a specialization. What are the tasks of jobs and or job descriptions? And I can't tell you how many times I worked and reworked job descriptions with a human resources director. Benefits of specialization. Workers can become proficient at a task. Transfer time between tasks is decreased. Specialized equipment can be more easily developed. Employee replacement becomes easier. So So there's a lot of benefits of specialization, and the more a company can get out of its employees, the better. Definitely everyone's out to save costs for their organization, and so this is something that's heavily looked at. Limitations of specialization. Workers who perform highly specialized jobs quickly become bored and dissatisfied. Anticipated benefits of specialization do not always occur. So yeah, if you are in a specific set of, all those job descriptions that you have, or that one job description you have that has very specific things in it, kind of limits you to doing those tasks. So there are definitely some limitations to job specialization. Alternatives to job specialization, job rotation. So basically moving employees from one job to another. Job enlargement, increasing tasks, increasing the number of tasks that workers perform. And then job enrichment is kind of an attempt to increase their task as well as giving the employee some control over what they have to do. So, job enrichment, job rotation is pretty good in that employees are cross-trained and they can move from one job to another. Definitely job enrichment would be the way I would go, because it gives me as an employee control over what I do to an extent, but it also increases the number of tasks. So combination of those, probably a good thing. Alternatives to specialization is also job characteristics approach. Suggests that jobs should be diagnosed and improved along 5 core dimensions, taking into account both the work system and employee preferences. So the core dimensions are skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy, and feedback. So this is kind of a cool way to describe any specific job. If you break it down into all of these components, I think it kind of adds a little more meaning to your job. Variety, the number of things a person does in a job. Task identity. Some employers like to take an employee, look at an employee at their strengths, and then fit them into certain things. So they identify certain tasks for that employee to do, and sometimes a good manager, in my opinion, will help tailor that job description to that employee and really try to pull out their strengths. Task significance, the perceived importance of the task. Autonomy, the degree, obviously the degree or control the worker has over the work performed. And I like the last one, feedback. How well is the job being performed, and how well do they know what their manager thinks of their performance? So those are good things. So this is just a kind of a task you might do if you're on the job. Divide into small groups. Select a job you observe regularly, such as a retail clerk, fast food worker. Describe how much each of the 5 core job dimensions is likely to exist in that job, and how that job might be changed to improve the core dimensions. So as a manager, this would be kind of a cool or fun task to do in figuring out and using your employees as guinea pigs. Have them sit down and say, okay, let's look at this one job description for, say, a retail clerk. Let's just see if they have this position has the 5 core job dimensions. So be kind of an interesting task to look at. So this breaks it down into, this chart kind of breaks it down into components, and you could actually do this on a chalkboard, I guess, or a dry erase board or whatever, and look at the core dimensions of put the job up there, maybe the job title up on the top of the board, and look at the core dimensions of a job, and look at skill variety, task identity, all those core dimensions, and then you go to the next box over. Under skill variety, task identity, task significance, is this a meaningful task? Are those meaningful tasks that employee is doing or performing? And then you go down to autonomy. How much autonomy does that person have as a retail clerk? Is he always being overseen or told what to do on a regular basis, or can that clerk actually use his or her creative mind and go out and do some of the things that they would like to do on a regular basis for their job? And then, does this retail clerk, does the supervisor give him or her feedback? And what does that look like? Is it verbal? Is it in written form? Those types of things. And then personal outcomes. High internal work motivation, high quality work performance, high satisfaction with the work, low absenteeism and turnover. So in the end, you want to make sure all of those things are satisfied. And if not, then you need to go back to the beginning and take a look at the skills and tasks and all those things that are important for that specific job and job description. So another thing of job specialization is an alternative are work teams. Allows an entire group to design the work system it will use to perform an interrelated set of tasks. Departmentalization, a process of grouping jobs according to some logical arrangement. So if we look at functional departmentalization, grouping jobs involving the same or similar activities. So if you're grouping activities, the advantages would be to each department can be staffed by experts in that functional area, which I think is kind of a good thing in many ways, because as a manager or as a hospital administrator, obviously there's specific departments that I had to oversee, like physical therapy. I definitely want physical therapy focusing on physical therapy, but even more specific than that, maybe your physical therapy department is really good with shoulders. So you want maybe one specific therapist is good with shoulders. So you want to maybe give all your shoulder cases to that physical therapist, and maybe you make that more a part of his specific job description, grouping some of those things in or tasks for that individual, and narrowing down his job description so he's becomes even more of an expert in that area. Disadvantages would be decision making tends to become slower, more bureaucratic. Employees may begin to concentrate too narrowly on their own function and lose sight of the total organizational system. And then accountability and performance become increasingly difficult to monitor. So this is I've seen this a lot in healthcare, and I've seen this even more recently as I participated in some shoulder rehabilitation after having a shoulder surgery, and I was actually sent to a specific physical therapist who dealt primarily with shoulders. He was really good at what he did, but as I talked with him during my many therapy sessions with him, I noticed that as other people approached him, he didn't necessarily know a lot about some of the other areas, like taking care of backs and that type of thing. In fact, I even asked him at the time about bringing my son in to do some rehab for his back when he just had surgery, and he said, "Yeah, I don't really do backs too much. This other physical therapist does that." So you can tend to be a little too narrow with some of the job groupings. Product departmentalization, so grouping activities around products or product groups. And the advantages of that would be all activities associated with one product or product group can be easily integrated and coordinated. The speed and effectiveness of decision making are enhanced. Performance of individual products groups can be assessed more easily and objectively. And that's very true. I mean, if you tailor certain employees around a certain product, they become experts on that product, and it definitely can help that customer out a lot better. Disadvantages may be department managers in each department may focus on their own product or product group to the exclusion of the rest of the organization. So if you have a manager who is only focused on his or her organization and not really pay attention to the rest of the organization or the long-term goals of the entire organization, that can be definitely a disadvantage. Plus administrative costs can be a problem. So customer departmentalization. So grouping activities to respond to and interact with specific customers or customer groups. So one advantage would be skilled specialists can deal with unique customers or customer groups. And then the disadvantage would be fairly large administrative staff required to integrate activities of various departments. So anyway, that's kind of cut and dry. Grouping jobs based on the basis of defined geographic sites or areas. This can be an advantage, obviously, for obvious reasons. The employee knows the area, the geographic region, and can more easily respond to unique customer characteristics and that type of thing. So I can think of an example. I'm a professional ski instructor. I teach at a specific resort, and I know the customers or the clientele who go to that resort. So I can pretty much tailor my instruction to those specific clientele or clients, and oftentimes those clients will come back year after year because they know that I understand them and what they're capable of and that type of thing. So switching gears a little bit to establishing reporting relationships. Chain of command, a clear and distinct line of authority among the positions in an organization. The chain of command has two components: unity of command. So definitely want to have unity within an organization among the leadership. And then scalar principle suggests that there must be a clear and unbroken line of authority that exists from lowest to highest position in the organization. Employees really pick up quickly when there's not unity of command within an organization. And talk about not trusting management. It can destroy an organization rather quickly if the people in leadership are not communicating with each other and with employees within the organization. Span of management. So basically it's just the number of people who report to a particular manager. There are no universal and cut and dry prescriptions for an ideal or optimal span of management. So a lot of that again depends on your tasks and the things that you have to oversee, whether or not, how technical each of the duties and responsibilities are for each employee. Establishing reporting relationship. Tall organizations can be pretty difficult because of the number of managers it involves. If you think about if you've ever worked for an organization that's has a lot of managers, it takes a lot to get through the communication all the way to the top dog of the organization, and then communication can break down in between. Whereas with a flat organization, which would be an organization I'd like to work for, and which I pretty much do now, it can lead to higher levels of employee morale and productivity, create more administrative responsibility because there are fewer managers, and then create more supervisory responsibility because there are more subordinates reporting to each manager. So flat organizations, you tend to get to a manager and communicate with the manager a lot more quickly than a tall organization. Distributing authority, power of organize that has been legitimized by the organization, the delegation process, the process by which a manager assigns a portion of his or her total workload to others. So if you've ever worked for an organization or a manager who's really good at delegating, it's kind of nice to, otherwise, I mean, there's a lot of managers who actually will keep all their jobs and a lot of things to themselves, and they're very strict about letting their tasks and things go out to their own employees to do, and so basically it involves trust. A lot of managers are not in a very trusting relationship oftentimes, and then it leads to distrust among employees and decrease in job satisfaction, and resulting eventually in high turnover rates. Decentralization and centralization. I've been through this before with organizations. Basically, decentralization is where you've got, let's just say you have everybody is in a big building, and you basically spread out, send out those employees to other locations, and basically not take away or not disintegrate your organization, but you move them out into other locations and manage them from somebody manages them from a central point still, or a central building, but they manage them from a distance. Centralization is more about retaining that power and authority right within, say, one building or organization, and keeping more of a close eye on everything. So if that makes sense. Decentralization and centralization. Factors that determine an organization's position on decentralization, centralization continuum. The organization's external environment. In general, the greater complexity and uncertainty of the environment, the greater is the tendency to decentralize. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Next slide. So it's good to try to, let's say you're a manager over a healthcare organization. Let's say it's a large, I don't know, something like with clinics, with a big, huge clinic organization or medical clinics, and you need to kind of decide, is centralization or decentralizing the better approach? What are the advantages and disadvantages? And it's good to sit down with employees, not just managers, but employees, get their input when you are trying to figure out whether to centralize or decentralize. Coordinating activities, process of linking activities of the various departments of the organization, the need for coordination. The primary reason for coordination is that departments and work groups are interdependent. Again, and they depend on one another for information and resources to perform their respective activities. So obviously, the more dependent the departments are on each other, the more they're going to have to work together and to be able to, or try to perform effectively. Coordinating activities. Three major forms of interdependence would be pooled interdependence, when units operate with little interaction. Sequential interdependence, when the output of one unit becomes the input of another in a sequential fashion. And then, of course, reciprocal interdependence, when activities flow both directions. So that's just kind of the hierarchy of that, how that works. Coordinating activities. Max Weber, who's a German psychologist, or not psychologist, sociologist, was a pioneer in organization design. at the core of his writings was what he called bureaucratic model of organizations. Bureaucracy, a model of organization design based on legitimate and formal system of authority. He originally viewed bureaucratic form of organizations as logical, rational, and efficient. He offered the model as a framework to which all organizations should aspire for one best way of doing things. And you can see why he would want to develop some kind of a model or system so everybody can kind of have something to follow. If not, you can see that organizations would go all kinds of different directions. But he made an attempt to actually find a legitimate way that people can fall into, organizations can follow and actually work more efficiently and effectively. Five basic characteristics: distinct division of labor, a consistent set of rules, a hierarchy of positions or offices that creates a chain of command from the top organization to the bottom, impersonal management and appropriate social distance between managers and subordinates, employment and advancement based on technical expertise, and employees protected by arbitrary dismissal. So as you think about his model here, think about all the organizations you may have worked for, and you can kind of see how all of these things are integrated in most organizations. Advantages would be improved efficiency, helps minimize favoritism or bias, makes procedures and practices very clear to everyone. Disadvantages results in inflexibility and rigidity, makes exceptions or changing rules difficult, results in neglect of human or social processes within the organization. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes you can see within an organization how, it's nice to get to know people within an organization, but yet if you don't keep it professional, it can also be a disadvantage. And then all of a sudden you've got some bias and favoritism going on. And so there's definitely advantages and disadvantages of this type of model. So that would be the end of this portion of my presentation. So I just want to thank you all. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much with my presentation, right, for the last 30 minutes or so. But I'd like you to take a look at, again, Chapter 6, review some of the things that we've discussed, and hopefully more of those things will ring true to you that we've talked about. And I would also advise you to outline the chapter, bullet point some of the things that we've talked about, and then maybe make some note cards for yourself, so when you take the exam you can be a little bit more ready. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.